types of consultancy?
It depends on the need of the company. What exactly are they looking for?
Normally that comes when you move into consulting.
You want more information, you want more knowledge, you want more skills.
Who is the real client? Is it the leader or the problem itself?
Your first customer is basically the person who hires you.
Do you think AI will actually be replacing jobs?
How did people perform before AI and after AI?
Do decision makers outside the automotive industry behave different?
Empowerment in the other industries is not a luxury.
However, today it's more into the consulting side. Now, the automotive industry doesn't really suffer from lack of effort. It actually suffers from the outdated thinking. That is what I personally believe. But Sharif, now in our past episode, we were discussing the service excellence. However, today it's more into the consulting side. And looking at today's episode, the headline, what do you think about that? I mean, and you're coming from an after-sales background, and then you move to consulting. What do you think about this?
Well, actually, if you're talking about the automotive and how far they are actually different from, the business mindsets, there was a certain time where, the mindsets were so stagnant and innovations were very limited. New ideas were very constrained. And I didn't realize that by the time when I was working, in the after-sales industry. I actually realized that when I stepped out from the after-sales and the automotive, business model into consulting, then suddenly I became like, wow, it's a very small spot in a bigger market, in a bigger mechanism, in a global, supply chain that actually is much more wider. And I was really surprised the way people actually were acting in the automotive, companies towards the market changes. I didn't actually have the same goggles, when I was working in the same industry, but stepping out of the circle is always healthy.
So that wide holistic view that you managed to get into the consulting, that the consulting world gave you that better view or helicopter view to the whole industry itself. Am I right in phrasing that?
Yes, let me just simplify it. When you're working in, within a company in the automotive, or let's say within a group of companies in the automotive, you have certain circles, you're just, working within. You have some boundaries that you don't see beyond, especially when you're, working on different levels. So you might be more focused on, the performance, the growth, the competition, how the market is responding towards, new products, new services, and so on. But you're not actually looking for, far, beyond those boundaries. You're not looking at the suppliers, how they are acting. You're not looking about, 2 steps ahead down the levels of customers, handing over the same product to others. You're not looking actually the manufacturer. Why is he actually, deciding such kind of procedures or regulations or whatever? So the whole chain, you're not actually looking at it. You're just so focused on a very limited, circle that doesn't allow you to, expand your exposure to understand the full picture.
But Sharif, and allow me to ask you this, because I'm going to ask you what triggered that move. That's the first thing. But going one step back before actually asking you that question, isn't that the same story that everyone works in after sales or sales or whatever their role is? When it is junior or middle management, normally they don't have that holistic view. Normally that comes when you move into consulting. Am I right?
Well, yes, and it's a little bit associated with the personnel who's actually having the mindset itself. If you have the mindset of continuous improvement, and here I'm not just talking about the trendy word, I'm talking about real mindset of continuous improvement. If you have such kind of mindset, what do you actually have or possess different from the others is basically you don't get any results that, or you don't achieve results and you're satisfied with. You want more. It's based on hunger. You want more information, you want more knowledge, you want more skills, you want to see more boundaries being broken, and you want to see a bigger picture. So since I started, by the 16 years old in the automotive as a technician, during the summer times and working, side by,
As an intern.
yeah, as an intern, and at the same time, studying engineering, I was like, okay, fine, I started early enough, but what's next is always the question that I was always asking myself. What's next? Okay, you're becoming a master technician. Okay, what's next? I'm becoming really okay. I understand the processes of, customer service, okay, spare parts, sales, and so on. Okay, what's next? Okay, dealer development. Okay, what's next? Okay, you're going global. Okay, what's next? I really need to understand how things ended
The
up.
science behind it.
Yeah, the minute you start hitting the wall and you don't have answers, this is where you realize that I am now hitting the boundaries and I need to crack them down to understand further and get more answers. And this is the main reason behind, cracking the walls. And I was like, after sales or automotive or sales or whatever, or spare parts, I want to shift to a wider view. I want to see it all.
So that was the real trigger.
Yes, it was hunger to more information, more, skills to be utilized and practices that I need to get exposed to.
Now, in the automotive industry, there are types of consultancy. And when we talk to leaders, normally from your experience, and the myth was always, should I go to strategy consultants or operational excellence consultants? Now, to leaders, when you were talking to leaders, and I know at that time when you were in consulting, you used to talk to leaders all the time. What are the automotive consultancy out there in the market and their requirements, basically?
Well, there are different types of consulting, let me also frame it. You have industry experts, which basically are more of advisors, and you have consultants. And even within the consulting, you have also partial experts, and you have consultants made consultants. So basically they have been graduated from business schools and they started their career by consulting. And the type of consulting, it differs from the need of any company or any business. But what triggers that? It's the need of a company to change something. And depending on what kind of, symptoms they want to change, this is where they start, okay, we will filter out the types of consulting, companies in the market. This is where you find financial services, you find legal services, you find strategy services, and you find execution services, which is basically more the business excellence, operations, development, and process engineering. They call it nowadays transformation experts. And also you have other, companies like the IT and other companies that would actually be working on HR, and the talent, management and so on. So it depends on the need of the company. What exactly are they looking for? In the previous or in the past, people were mixing up all consultant types together, and the minute they see somebody with an expensive suit, expensive haircut, and an expensive watch, yeah, that's a consultant. Okay, now we end up with a very weird strategy. He's gonna just leave it on the table and leave the company, and it's gonna be a challenge for everyone to manage to execute it. And that's the very broad, misperception of consultants in different, companies and industries as well.
But I cannot help but ask, then at what point does actually the company or leader of that company have to actually take a decision to bring in a consultant?
Well, realistically speaking, it depends on the size of the company and the type of change that he wants to deliver. So leaders, they are very smart in taking that decision. First of all, he has a budget for external consulting already there. And it depends on the size of the company. This is where you have a certain budget to maneuver around. And he gets to prioritize the things that he wants to do. So he might say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna save that budget for, IT consulting. Maybe another guy would be like, you know what, it's not the problem of IT. I wanna set a clear strategy for the whole group. Or maybe someone will show up and say, okay, we have the strategy, we have the IT systems, but we don't have the execution horsepower. And this is where we want to review how we are doing business today. And we need somebody with a fresh eye coming from, a different background to look at all our, processes and understand, are we doing things in the right way to deliver the objective of the company or not? And if there's something wrong in our strategy, we want to make sure that people are actually, as they say, people who are not engaged in the strategy setting, and at the same time they are not the daily operation guys. We want somebody who should be a fair guy to step in and say, you know what, there is a gap here. This strategy does not consider the internal, resources or whatever. We will have to fine tune it or tweak it around to make sure that it's delivered.
But then this brings me to the very next question, which is very important. When the consultants come in, who is the real client? Is it the leader or the problem itself?
Well, yeah, that's a very nice question. Look, normally consultants, they are used to, such kind of challenges, because normally when they show up, we do understand there are multiple stakeholders in, the project. So your first customer is basically the person who hires you. But you need to understand that there is a difference between a customer, the influencer, and the person who's actually steering somehow or doing the job that is in the process. So the actual customer in the case of external consultants is basically the CEO or the higher management. But the influencers could be the middle management. And this is where consultants always pay attention in how they treat the middle management while they're working. Because if they don't actually intend to show what's happening on the ground, you will not be able to do it as an external person. It's not like you're just showing up and you're fishing out everything and just sending a report. No, it doesn't work like that. So the actual customer, from my, opinion, are the actual people, who are doing the job, the people who are on the ground. These are the people who know well how the company should be performing or what could be improved. It's a bottom-up approach better than a top-down.
Our next point is strategy versus execution. Now, normally companies or groups have a strategy deck. Why, when going to the execution phase, we find a lot of struggle there in that journey?
There might be multiple, let's say, gaps on different levels of the organization. And the main reason behind that could be the culture of the organization itself. Depends. It's different from a corporate or a family, regardless. But the culture is very important. Then I would give you, for example, if you go to a company and you want to test, if the higher management really understand the strategy set by the company, just go in the room, gather all the executive team, and give a piece of paper to everyone and tell them, what do you think about the strategy of the company and what is your role to deliver that? You will be amazed in the results you're going to get. It is very rare that you find the majority of the people aligned. You will find the finance, they have their own objectives that are not, aligned with the customer centricity. They're more of cash and risk driven and so on. You will find the operation people, they're like, we are, performance driven. So you will find the sales pretty much more customer centric, and he is, keeping an eye on the market changes, but he cannot do it without, the other teams. So at that first level, you will see the first, gap. And this gap, by the way, is cascaded down the organization. And you can see it in the actions of the people, because everyone is cascading the way he thinks the objective should be met. And this is where the gaps become bigger and bigger and bigger. The bottom-up approach, if it's not there in the company, then it's a bigger issue, because the people on the ground, they're not delivering the information on time to the right people. And this is where the whole ecosystem starts, having communication gaps, less performance. The objective is somehow off track. So that's where we step in.
But then, in your experience, where does this breakdown usually happen?
Well, it's normally, starting from the communication. People actually think that when you make a very nice statement, and a vision, and you put a strategy in place, they assume that people have the same competency to understand it, which is not the true case. You might have different perceptions, backgrounds, experience. If you say something, I'll perceive it differently because I have a different background, experience, and so on. So making things clear and, as they say, crisp for all the people in the organization, it is very important, and always making sure that everybody understands how this reflects on their jobs and the objectives, that the holistic, company objective is, being set, and what is their contribution. This is where everybody starts freestyling and trying to make sure that, I'm pleasing the management because I'm delivering the objective. And suddenly you find something else completely different from the objectives.
But now, going to the next point, which is the transformation, which is actually part of the point we are discussing now. During these transformations, normally, is there a magic recipe going forward, or normally you will find different case scenarios that you will have to customize your solution based on it?
Well, there's something in common for successful companies that, actually manage to deliver. It's not about the organization, the formal organization that people know. It's about the leadership style that is basically there, and the cross-functional, teams that they work together, the shared leadership model that gets to, to be within a company. Because leadership is not like a centralized function. It's more of a mindset of people, how to make sure that you select the right people at the right situation to take the lead. You don't have to be the CEO to take decisions on the ground. You don't have to be, the business operations, director to be taking decisions and so on. So you might have empowerment in place and a structure that allows, people to work in cells and make sure that silos are cracked and the performance is always, reported, and all the resources are, all the enablers are there, and somebody is watching. You will have in corporate, companies, a structure called, you have a champion for a project, and that champion reports to a business owner or a process owner, and that process owner reports, all the results to a committee, and that committee doesn't have to be all the business directors. You can actually use, 3 or 4, but those are the committees that makes sure that all the enablers and all the barriers are, cracked.
So in transformation, again, back to the same point, transformation. In failing transformations, is it the tech when a company embraces a new technology, or it's actually the mindset?
No, it's not the tech. It was never about the tech, okay? Because let's look at technology. Why did it exist? Technology is more of a tool that helps people to deliver better. So it doesn't mean if I give you, a very speedy or fast car, doesn't mean that you're gonna fail in the driving test. It doesn't make sense. There is something wrong, which is basically how people used the tech, how the tech adapts to the type of business or the business nature. Are you bringing me the wrong tech? Did you ask me about my needs before getting the tech? Did you involve me? Or was it imposed and people made it a very, very successful, miserable, idea to all the IT people that they start scratching their head, what is wrong with our users? Maybe they are incompetent or the system has an issue, and everybody starts, going into those dilemmas saying, you know what, we are failing because we changed the ERP. Well, actually, no. It is basically the structure that has been placed when you launched this. Did you prepare it? Did you start announcing it? Did you train the people? Did you orient them? Did you ask them at the initial phase, do you believe that this system is actually, did you involve them in the procurement cycle? Do you believe that this system will help us? Because every company has a different requirement based on their setup and operations and the processes. Even though if you have somebody who has the industry expert, whatever, when he shows up trying to impose the business operations of a company of a size of a giga size on a small startup, it doesn't work. The cost of ownership of ERPs and tech, people don't actually go to that extent and calculate it, but it will be scary because sometimes companies go and just pay millions from their budgets, and they never realized that something else increased in the income statement, the manpower costs to manage that system.
I've always been a fan of consultants, by the way, but
Okay,
that's true.
That's very
Because
rare.
I've always seen that whenever they walk into entities, they spot real gaps quite quickly. And I always ask myself, what are what are the skills that these guys have that makes them spot these gaps quite quickly?
Well, it's not magic. If we're talking about in specific, process engineering, lean management, and so on, Six Sigma, we have, been trained on the way how to look at things. We look at things like little boxes. We can visualize, operations like something that steps in, something steps out. It gets to be processed within a box. I don't care what is happening inside the box at the moment, but I need to know how the boxes are connected to each other and how they are correlated and how this mechanism is completely built up. Once you have all the boxes, which is basically the first thing that I got, to gain skills in the consulting, was something called the value stream mapping. And there was this, book, which is basically the first thing that I ever went through, Mike Rother. It's called Learning to See. And I was like, wow, learning to see. Is there an approach to see things? Maybe we didn't see things, in the past. Maybe this guy has something new or, a different way to see things. And yes, we see things in a different way into symbols. Everything is translated to symbols. And the minute you start going there, you start mapping out all the operations, all the processes, everything inside the company. It's as if you are putting or plotting the business model on paper.
And I think that also allows you to see the deeper issues in those entities, right?
When you connect everything together, you became to realize if X have an issue, then most probably Z somewhere has a multiplication because of that issue.
Wow. Now, leaders hear about different methodologies: Lean, Six Sigma, Toyota Way, Kaizen. Now, looking at these different methodologies, how should leaders actually choose between them and how to help their organizations? And even when bringing in a consultant, how do they actually choose which consultant to come in? With which mindset or skill set?
Okay, that's a good question, because normally people don't actually tell the differences. All of those are frameworks and tools used to manage change to the better. Uh, you cannot use all of them at the same time. You can use some of them that would fit the situation, and other situations you don't use them, you use something else. So it's like a toolbox. And leaders don't actually use that toolbox unless they are 100% aware what is the impacts and how they execute it. When you bring out in a consultant, you don't actually tell them, I want to implement lean. Okay, I want to be agile. I want to implement, Six Sigma. Because basically the consultant, when he steps in, he gets to assess the need first. He gets to, as I mentioned, he gets to do a quick value stream. It could take up to 3 weeks or something, closed rooms. The guy is like going on the shop floor, meeting, people, interviewing people, taking samples and analyzing heavily figures and financials and so on. Then he goes back and he says, okay, you know what? This part, we're going to start implementing, the lean management. And this part would be more of a Six Sigma. And this part, no, we have to be agile. What exactly is the method that based on it, he gets to decide? Normally, lean management is been used for standardizing something, that you make sure that you get the best performance without any waste, or minimized necessary waste, and increasing the values. The Six Sigma, this is where you will find that people are taking it to the next level, where you have to go far beyond the level of analytics, and you're gonna go extreme. And this actually works in the banking sector, works in the industry of airlines and so on, and partially food and beverage. But the rest don't actually go to that extent, because you don't have that massive amount of data to process and to start fishing out the clear issues. But if you're talking about lean management and Six Sigma is the advanced level. But if you don't have lean management in place, you don't have standardizations, you don't have SOPs, trust me, the consultant will be running away from the project, because he will go crazy. He cannot analyze the situation because standards are not there. Agile is basically where you want to start applying new methods that gets to respond to the customer, to the market quicker than competition. And this is where you make sure that, normally the marketing teams, they are big fans of agile production in new products being launched and so on. And even the leaders, they understand when to go for the agile, and sometimes they mix up between Six Sigma and lean management. And this is where the consultant starts trying to clarify, no, you don't need that, you need this. Or if we implement this and pilot it, then roll it out, then we can go to the next level and. So it's a journey of a continuous improvement that doesn't end.
Often we see some organizations that have kind of a chaos inside. And you may look at it as a very profitable or successful organization. Is that model actually existing? Or normally that is something that's wrong in there?
That's a good observation.
which I would say organized chaos. Let's put it this way.
Okay, I'll tell you what. Sometimes you see chaos, but at the same time you see profits. But you don't understand how is this happening. It happens because you have the cash-to-cash cycle are managed very well. The more liquidity you have within an organization, you never realize the gaps. And this is where you can see it, but you don't know where's the issue. If I'm selling at cash and buying at credit, then you're in a honeymoon business model. Why? Because you have so much liquidity inside the business that allows people to have gaps, mistakes, issues. But the minute you start having an unbalanced, cash-to-cash cycle, this is where the liquidity is squeezed within the company and everybody starts shouting optimization.
The reality is, then I would rephrase your answer, that it only exists in some very specific cases, I would say.
Yes, because Normally, you should be able to spot the issues. But if you go to any leader and he's like, he's in the honeymoon that has so much liquidity, but he doesn't really, have a hold of what's happening, then trust me, there is a big issue.
So in other words, chaos is still chaos.
It is always, you will always have room for, repairing things. You will have room to continuously improve. But it's always a challenge when you get stuck with a mindset of a leader that says, we are the, market leaders, we are on top. This is where, the failure starts.
Now the next topic is AI. A lot of people talk about AI, and a lot of people think it will actually be replacing jobs. And that has been a long debate. Do you think AI will actually be replacing jobs, or will it only be replacing traditional jobs and sharpening the roles going forward?
AI actually improves the performance of the outputs and the inconsistency of the outputs. But think about it this way. How did people perform before AI and after AI? What was the productivity or the performance? If you're looking about the jobs that are going to be replaced, blindly I can tell you, any job that did not deliver any value to the customer and he's not willing to pay for, is going to be replaced by AI easily. Simple. If the customer doesn't see the value, then the AI would be the solution. This is where you want to automate things. But if the customer insisted on having a human being doing that task and he's willing to pay for it, then there's no other point. You will have to follow the customer needs. And if you're talking about the repeated type of jobs that have a certain pattern, yes, even with customizations, they require so much engagement with the customer that AI today is trying to understand the behavior of the customers, but the emotional intelligence is still there. The human beings are still superior in this, and they will still be superior because that's the human nature. People, yes, understand how the machine could do, but at the same time, they want to deal with humans. So if you check Toyota, for example, if you're talking about the automation, Toyota, with all the advancement they have in the production, in the manufacturing facilities, you will find that the first, processes are almost like 90% automated with robots and so on. Then the automation level drops across the other, production lines. This has been done for a reason. They have robots that are capable of doing that. Other companies who are providing robotics, advanced robotics, can do the job. But I want to ask you a question. Why didn't they actually replace all those people until now? Because you still have the human factor needed there. The judgment of the human, it is still a must.
Now, when we compare the automotive industry with the rest of the industries that you've interacted with, what is the one thing that you were always shocked with and felt it is actually outdated?
Complexity is one thing. Automotive sector, I came to realize it is very complex because of basically old strategies. So if you have a certain strategy that serves fragmentation of the market, you have more players in, the processes become more complex, logistics becomes an issue, handovers increase, and you're like, that actually never happens in the food and beverage. Why? Because you have to sustain and control the supply chain from one end to another to make sure that the product is being delivered at a certain temperature, controlled temperature, and has to go to the market at a certain time. So the just-in-time concept is literally there. Otherwise, the product, shelf life will be already expired. In the automotive, it is so complex and driven by old methodologies, even though it's claimed that it's completely new. No, actually in the automotive sector, it's more about the cars and the technology is the new things. But the services and the processes, everything is almost the same the last 20 years, never changed. Even the warranty, policies, they are still the same. Same book. You can see it everywhere and everywhere. Manufacturer is recommending XYZ. So even customers are already fed up. Then nobody actually reads it.
But then, which industries have you always seen that have better leadership and better execution?
Food and beverage. And yeah, because the cycle there is very dynamic. The turnover is very, very scary. You're talking about thousands of products coming in and out, logistics, technology, integration, market intelligence, reports, and they really implement, the ecosystem to manage so that they can compete. By the way, their margins are not really big, but the growth is very high and the potential is high. So the size of the business could be really big. Margins are very limited, but at the same time, if they are not efficient, these guys will be out of the market in no time. So they cannot afford to have such kind of, issues in the automotive. The automotive is still, a lower speed type of, supply chain. If you order the car today, most probably it's gonna end up in the, if you take it through the whole value stream, could take about 5 to 6 months by the time the first customer to put his hands on the car, where you have ordering time, planning for production, then the production to release, then you release the cars, then ship to the country. After shipped, then it's distributed to the dealership, then it's in the stockyards, then it ends up, okay, it has been sold, great. So there is a lot of time here wasted. So the shelf lifetime is different.
Out of curiosity, do decision makers outside the automotive industry behave different?
Well, they are more into quicker responses, I would say, and empowerment in the other industries is not a luxury. So I would say they are not more of observers rather than responding and proactively understanding more of the consumer behavior. In the automotive, you would find, for example, 60-70% of the market, all the automotive companies, they are like in the steady state observing, is this working for the customers or not? Should we, start injecting, I remember this case, which is like 4 or 5 years ago, when the compact SUVs were still by the 2020, still not a trendy thing, and people were not really trusting, is it gonna pick up or not? Then you find 2 dealerships, they decide to, have a slight penetration of 2 types of mini compact, SUVs. And they start testing the market, and boom. This is where you find, okay, everybody started following. But in the other industries, it doesn't actually work that way. It's a bit different.
But then this also brings us to the next question. Why do you believe that in the automotive sector, it is still lagging behind in terms of behavior?
Musical chairs. That's unfortunately a barrier, because in the food and beverage, I don't think you memorize, a name for any leadership for any company unless you are within that specific industry. In the automotive, it's more like celebrities. They leave this company, they go to the other. And from this company, they go to the other. And at the end, they're switching places, And the change of the configuration doesn't mean that you have changed the rules of the game. It is still the same, and still same players, but they're, working for different, clubs. It's like the soccer. In the food and beverage, it's not like that. So you have new blood every time. You have new people who want to implement new marketing strategies. They want to penetrate markets differently. They want to be perceived differently. They change the packaging, they change the pricing, they drive, the consumer uh, suspicions towards a new product very well. In the automotive, it's like you have a playbook, and if somebody is out of the musical chairs, then this is where we promote somebody else. Then we have a new player within the same circle. So it's not that easy to change. But sometimes if you have new dealerships coming into that market, this is where they start cracking that cycle a little bit. But taking resources from one place to another actually doesn't help, because you're playing with the same. I'm not challenging the expertise, but I'm challenging the rules of the game. They're not changing, because these are the leaders who are also setting the strategies. So if I'm setting a strategy here, then I move on and go to another company, set the strategy there. I'm the same person.
Now, our next point is transformation.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of groups invest heavily in digital transformation, yet results don't always follow on the same path. Why do you think that's a scene that happens?
It depends on what exactly are you trying to achieve by a digital transformation. Are we talking about, paperless organization? Are you looking for a different experience to the customers? Are you looking for performance? So it depends. What exactly is the company objective from a digital transformation? Because this word, still again, it's like trendy word. We are going through a digital transformation. Yes. Where's the value to the customer? Would this actually make the product cheaper? No. Would this actually improve the lead time for serving the customer? No. Okay, what does it actually, serve? It gives us better control. Yeah, good luck. That's for you, but not for the customer. So the thing here is, if the organization has a clear vision of what is expected from the digital transformation, this actually avoids them to drive, ERP or digital, solution companies. They drive him crazy, because today they are asking for a certain scope, tomorrow they are changing the scope and they want something else. Then they blame the technology again. So there has to be somebody blamed, by the way. So it's always the technology, the tech solution provider.
But then that leads us to the next question. When does it drift?
Well, it drifts when, as I told you, when you set a scope and you don't include all the stakeholders. And I know it's very simple. When you have a mission or a statement or an objective of the company, then you start looking for, service providers. But the first mistake is you don't involve the people who are actually operating the company, all aspects, and have them attend and understand what exactly is this company providing to us and how this will help us. And at the same time, share perceptions. Maybe there's something wrong with that, system or ERP or this technology. It doesn't fit our business because we have X, Y, Z. Maybe it doesn't fit our size. Maybe it doesn't fit our industry. Maybe we're doing something different or operating in different locations that doesn't allow us to use the same system setup. So those are the things, if you don't do initially, which is the pre-launch or the POC, and just include the IT teams and leadership and forget about the rest of the organization, you're making sure that you're going to provide a very expensive, solution, and they will make sure that you will have a very miserable feeling for taking that decision later on. After 1 year or 2 years of that investment, the organization will make it fail.
You know that it's very important whenever companies are actually introducing new tech, it's to also introduce the key users and train them and help them train the rest of their teammates and identify the ownership itself of the project in those entities. I think that is key for success.
Of course, it's again, it is the same approach of, the communication, introducing something new to people, because people always, are reluctant towards something that they don't know, the unknown. They fear that they will lose their job. They fear that this will be an additional burden to them. In some cases, I cannot blame them. Yes, in some cases, there are, tech solutions in the market that are provided at millions, but they don't actually reduce the headcounts. They actually increase the headcounts because it requires a labor intensive to input all this type of information, which is like, it brings us back to the cost of ownership again. Nobody looks at it and nobody discusses it. But in the automotive, everybody is required to declare his cost of ownership. Okay, what about tech solutions? Okay, everybody becomes quiet. So yes, it is always a challenge, but there is always a successful way in introducing tech and making sure that the people are engaged and even fell in love with the solution itself. They embrace it. They become the ambassadors of the implementation. But it's also about how you introduce it and how you approach. When you listen to the users, you understand their needs, work on them and respond, positively. And this is something very famous about the tech industry. They always, give attention to the user experience. But sometimes other companies, in the market, they are like, yeah, we're so big that we don't need to understand from the users what do they need. We know what should be done. You should follow. Educate your teams. Trust me, they all fail.
Sharif, I gotta ask you this. What is the most expensive mistake to companies along the digital transformation journey that you keep seeing happening all the time?
So the most common is simply forcing solutions on people and trying to convince them that, it's there for the sake of making their life easier. Communication is the issue. If you don't communicate and force people to something, they will make sure that you will be just remembering this, mistake forever, because they have the capability to just do nothing. And do nothing is the most harmful thing for any company. Being stagnant, it doesn't mean that you got a system that you will perform. Doing nothing means no input. So they made sure that this system is not alive.
Now, going out of the digital transformation into the transformation in general of organizations. And when I say transformation, I'm talking about from the consultation point of view and companies. When you face the resistance within those companies or entities, how did you personally handle it?
I cannot also deny that there is a good part about interpersonal skills. The good consultant basically builds a rapport with the client and the people on the ground. So the minute they start trusting the personality or the person who's stepping in to help, and they understand he's not there for audit or to point fingers, he's there actually to support, they start utilizing his skills. And even within change, if you have some barriers, you will find the brand ambassadors there trying to facilitate things for you. They will have, those kind of groups where influence groups, they will be around you to make sure that, at least you get to succeed to have a pilot. It doesn't have to be the full transformation clear to all. They will make sure that at least you succeed to have a pilot, showcase, and this is where everybody starts to round up and say, okay, wait a minute. If they did it before in this pilot, why couldn't we do it? So there are many things, of course, related to incentivizing people, training, orienting them, and so on. But those are too technical type of initiatives. But I'm telling you the thing that normally people don't say. If you ask that question, you will get, okay, we have the training, we have the introduction, we have the onboarding, we get continuous communication, and so on. But the hidden part, which is basically the interpersonal skill, the character of the consultant. If they like him, they will ask for him by name. And it happens a lot in the consulting business, where they say, okay, you know what, this person, he's already engaged on another project, sorry, we'll stop until he's back, or try to book another time when he's free, then we lock him for next 6 months or something. It happens.
Do great consultants sometimes have to challenge CEOs directly?
Yeah, at a certain point of time when something is wrong on the ground and they are stuck with their expertise or long serviced years, yes, consultants sometimes they are not industry experts, but the figures, the facts, the observations, the feedback, the sampling, everything says against what they perceive. Then yes, you have to have a tough discussion with the CEO for sure, but it has to be backed up with logical arguments. Otherwise it will be it will be just an argument that will be disputed forever. But once you have the logic, the leaders normally understand, yes, maybe we were a little bit biased, maybe we need to listen a little bit. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to implement it 100%. 20% is okay. Then you start bargaining there. Okay, I'll tell you what, we agree on 20% these 2 months. I'll not be pushy. Then I'll leave you for 2 months. Then I will be back. Okay, then we will give it another 20%. It's more like you're trying to give the medication to the patient, and sometimes if he resists, you will have to figure out a way to make him accept it.
Looking back at your journey, and I've known some consultants as well, the burnout rate on the consultant's career journey is actually faster than other industries. Why is so?
It's a very tough and dynamic type of job. It's they always call it the learning on the fly. So you have limited time for for your personal life. There is always, I cannot say there is always a balance between personal life and business. It's more of very focused and very structured day for a consultant, where he has to be waking up at a certain time. He has to show up, of course, the majority of them, they're living in hotels, traveling the majority of the time, visiting clients, always, on budget flights. They work late nights. They have to be at the, whatever site to serve at. So their personal life is a bit behind, and the quality time with their families becomes an issue. That could be one. Second could be the continuous travel and the amount of exhausted late days they have to spend, and also they have so much pressure and stress to deliver on certain times. In consulting, of course, it's all about scope and a timeline to deliver. If you're working in a normal company, you don't actually have that kind of bandwidth stretched. You can always negotiate on the timelines, you can always negotiate on the deliverables, even the scope you can change. But in consulting, you don't do that. So they get worn out if they don't have short breaks every now and then. So I would expect maximum that a consultant can run realistically, maximum about 2 to 3 months. Then he has to have a short break, then to be able to go back and get a full run of 3 months and so on. So that's one of the reasons why consultants, they actually take frequent vacations. To the normal industries, it's considered as frequent, but in reality they are actually boosting their performance actually twice faster than the regular jobs.
If someone is considering going into the career of consultancy, what would be the pros and cons? And I'm talking about even someone junior.
Well, junior, this is the best time you join consulting, because you have the maximum capacity to learn fast, flexible. It's more like a sponge. He will be able to develop so much skills have better exposure, and see different industries, meet new people, have different communities to interact with. And this is where you actually have the opportunity to do from the age of 22 up to 35, an age of 35. After the 35, if you are still, on the road, it will be a bit tough. You have to be somewhere like, project manager or principal or a partner level to be able to manage. But this is the golden time for the consultants from 22 to 35. And they really need to utilize that, because this is where the majority of your booster is there. You can actually deliver a lot. You can do late nights. You can go extra miles. You can do amazing things. And this is where they actually unlock their potential. No one of us actually knows his potential until he starts stretching his, capabilities beyond the comfort zones. And this is what happens, in consulting. You always challenge yourself. You build your internal pressure.
So who actually thrives and who struggles to survive within that industry?
Well, the people who are hungry for knowledge, experience, and at the same time, exposure. They are willing to let go comfort. They are willing to let go peace of mind and look for a high pressure, high speed, and also different challenges every day. Those are the type of guys that, or the mindset that they actually survive. Plus, the character is very important, because you might have all of this, and if you have the wrong attitude, the customer will basically just kick you out. The people who don't survive are the people who don't have any of this, are actually the opposite. They want a typical type of job. They want to be promoted from here and there. They care about the brand they work for. They attach themselves to the brand, and they don't want much challenges. They feel irritated, and they just capitalize on whatever the company actually gives them. So they wait until the company moves them to the next levels. But in consulting, it's like you're growing somebody who's a bit more like a street fighter type.
Well, Sharif, at the end of today's episode, I really would like to thank you. And
That's
I would
my
just like to end it with an end quote, which is: transformation is not really about installing new systems or implementing or reinforcing it on the team members, but it's actually uninstalling ego and alignment of the team members and objectives. And this is very much what you walked us through today, as well as, of course, the continuous learning and eagerness for that. Would you agree to that?
Yes, of course, absolutely 100%.
Thank you very much, and looking forward for our last trilogy, which is the rent-a-car business. And I know that's your favorite, so thank you very much.
You're most welcome. Thank you very much, Shadi.
Thank you.